Today I'm working on a previously started painting and just hoping that I can bring it to the end. I'm using a very wide color shaper tool, which is a silicone brush. I like using the color shaper on the side and also on the edge, depending on the kind of mark I want to achieve. So by using it on the side, I can kind of scrape the paint across previous layers of texture, and I'm just adding more layers to enrich the colors and have some modulation in the color. Also bringing in some stronger value shifts between the light and the dark. So this painting is purely from imagination. I love going out into nature and especially walks and hikes around estuaries and ponds, listening to the birds sing and the stillness, seeing all the textures of the grasses and the vegetation. I find that nature is a way for me to fill up my cup and be able to stay balanced and also bring inspiration back into my studio. This allows me to paint from memory, even though I may take a lot of photos that I might look at. I don't follow the photo, and this one I really didn't use photo inspiration at all, just purely my imagination and trying to respond to the canvas. I find when I work with a photo, I can often get too caught up in trying to make it look like the photo, and I don't feel it is my best work. So I prefer painting intuitively. I know it's not for everybody. One of the things that my students ask me a lot is how can they paint looser, and I think one of the keys to painting loose is to respond to your last brush stroke, but also how you hold your brush. Holding it at the end of the handle or even extending the handle can make a big difference. You have a lot less control. Using big brushes, trying to get a big swath of color on and not diddle around with a really small brush, especially on a big painting. So I'm just doing a bit of shaping at the top and removing some of the color that was up in the corner there, just giving a little bit more negative space, something that might resemble a sky. I'm not trying to make a definite horizon line in this painting, but I do want to have something at the top that's interesting and looks like vegetation. I've mixed my greens from green and blues and some black. I mixed my greens from blue and yellow and also some black and yellow. I don't enjoy greens out of the tube so much, but prefer to mix my own. There's an exception to that, and that is green gold. I do enjoy that color that is pre-mixed. I don't have any right now, so I'm making something that looks similar. So just building up and adding and subtracting brings a great richness to the work. I like to blend my paint a lot, which can be difficult with acrylic. So I add gel medium to it at about a 50-50 ratio to give it a longer time to dry, but also build up the texture. I can use a lot more product this way. And it does dilute the color a little bit, but not to the point that it is transparent. So I really enjoy doing that, and I mix up my palette in oversized ice cube trays with plastic lids that you can get at a home store, a kitchen store. I find this keeps my paint wet for a really long time, and I waste a lot less. It also makes it easy for everything to be ready to go, so I can mix my neutrals, my darks, my lights, and have my clear, clean colors as well. I like to use one ice cube tray for each color story, so I might have my warm color in one and my mixed greens in another, my blues in another, depending of course on my palette. And I would always mix some neutrals, as I like using those to make the color pop out. So a neutral is just a grayed down color. So you get that by, you can add black. I don't prefer to do that normally, but I like adding a bit of the opposite color, and that's going to gray it down. So you can start by practicing that, just adding a very little bit of the opposite color. So if you don't know your opposites, get your color wheel out, or if you don't have one, you can find one online, and you'll really be miles ahead if you understand color when it comes to painting your work. So I'm keeping this painting as a cooler painting in the blues and green tones, but I do have warm greens and cool greens and blues, and I like to have a nice variety of colors going on so that it isn't boring, and there's lots of gradations of the color and the tones and shades. I'm also looking at the shapes as well, making sure that I have a variety in the shapes and that I don't end up with just a lot of little wee shapes, that there's bigger shapes as well. So sometimes it's hard to really think about a painting as shapes, especially when you haven't really identified them and you're just painting from imagination. But everything in art really boils down to shape, and we want to make sure that we have a good variety that keeps our painting interesting. Other things we want to make sure is that we don't end up with a lot of the same repetition. You want to watch your corners, and I'm just adding a few highlights and a bit of color over top of that neutral area. A little bit of light coming up into the front here. So I have little bits of pink and peachy tones peeking through that kind of leads your eye around and gives a little bit of interest against the blues and greens. Got a little smaller brush now, just putting in a bit of highlight. The trick is not to paint your whole painting with a small brush. Just maybe use it to add a couple of details at the end. Using different tools can also help keep your work loose and provide some different types of marks and brush strokes so that you're not getting too repetitive in your strokes, and it just gives you more variety, which makes your painting more interesting. So I'm using a palette knife now, and I'm just scumbling over top of some of that texture, putting some lightness on top of the dark. I'm feeling like I'm getting close to finished now, and just really adding some bits here and there and little tweaks, but not really doing too much. Kind of standing back and looking at this, coming in with a bit of dry media, which is pastel, and hitting the high spots, adding a little bit of line and texture. Now that will need to be sealed because it's dry media, and you can use a spray fixative, or you can use gingerly clear gesso, or you could paint a medium on a piece of wax paper and blot it on top of your dry media. There's different ways of sealing it, but you do want to make sure that you seal it before you put a clear coat and varnish on top. Otherwise it's just going to smudge into your medium and around on your painting, and that's not what you want to have happen. So be sure that you do fix it before you work on top of it again. So I know you can't really see those details too much from a distance, but they do add little bits of color and kind of make the painting a little more cohesive without adding a lot of strong paint to it. So I hope you enjoyed watching. I'm feeling this is near finished now, and the title of this piece is called Nature's Embrace, and I think it really does speak for the painting. Leave a comment below the video. Happy to answer your questions. Bye for now.